When money gets tight, certain foods start showing up again and again. Not because they're trendy, but because they stretch, last, and quietly make meals easier. These are the kinds of foods people tend to rely on when they're trying to spend less without feeling it every day. So with that in mind, let's look at this as a countdown. Starting with the foods that help a little and working our way toward the ones that tend to carry the most weight when money gets tight. 10. Pasta. Pasta tends to sit near the bottom of the list, not because it isn't useful, but because it's so common that people forget how far it stretches. A single box often turns into multiple meals, especially when paired with simple ingredients. It stores easily, cooks fast, and absorbs flavor well. Small amounts of sauce or seasoning go a long way, which quietly reduces how much needs to be spent on extras over time. 9. Frozen vegetables. Frozen vegetables don't usually get much attention, but they consistently earn their place in a low-budget kitchen. They last longer than fresh produce and come already prepared, which makes them easier to rely on. There's also less waste. You use what you need and save the rest without the pressure of timing meals perfectly. That flexibility often ends up saving more money than people expect. 8. Canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes are rarely the star of a meal, but they support a lot of them. They store well and often replace fresh produce that can be more expensive or spoil faster. They quietly become the base for sauces, soups, and stews. Because they function as a building block rather than a finished food, they tend to stretch grocery budgets in the background. 7. Oats. Oats are usually associated with breakfast, but their real value shows up in how adaptable they are. They're inexpensive, filling, and easy to customize based on what's available. A large container lasts a long time and doesn't require refrigeration. Sweet or savory, quick or slow cooked, oats tend to provide consistency when routines and budgets feel uncertain. 6. Peanut butter. Peanut butter often surprises people when they look at how long one jar actually lasts. It's calorie-dense, filling, and works across meals and snacks. It doesn't spoil quickly and doesn't demand extra ingredients. Foods like this tend to stay in rotation when money is tight, because they solve several problems at once. 5. Eggs. Eggs sit in a unique middle ground. They aren't always the cheapest item in the store, but they consistently deliver more value than expected. They work at any time of day and reduce decision fatigue. When options feel overwhelming, eggs offer a reliable default that doesn't require much time, effort, or planning. Quick pause here. If some of these foods feel almost too obvious, that's kind of the point. The most effective budget foods usually aren't exciting, they're consistent. And as the list goes on, that pattern becomes harder to ignore. 4. Potatoes. Potatoes have stayed a staple food for generations, and that's not accidental. They're inexpensive, filling, and surprisingly versatile. They also create the feeling of abundance. Plates look fuller, meals feel heavier, and portions feel more satisfying, which matters when budgets start to feel restrictive. 3. Lentils. Lentils often go unnoticed, but they perform exceptionally well on a budget. They cook quickly, don't require soaking, and still feel substantial. They absorb flavor easily, meaning small amounts of seasoning go a long way. That balance between effort and payoff is usually what keeps lentils around when money is limited. 2. Beans. Beans are one of the most reliable budget foods available. They're inexpensive, filling, and accessible almost everywhere. They quietly replace more expensive protein options and pair easily with other low-cost foods. Over time, they tend to lower grocery bills without drawing attention to themselves. 1. Rice. Rice earns the top spot because of how consistently it shows up when people are trying to spend less. It's inexpensive, shelf-stable, and scales effortlessly from single meals to feeding entire households. It doesn't demand attention, but it supports everything else. Vegetables feel more filling, beans feel more complete, and smaller portions of other foods go further. When money is tight, having a dependable base like this tends to reduce stress in ways that aren't always obvious. So looking back at the list, the ranking isn't really about taste or popularity. It's about how often a food shows up when people are trying to spend less without sacrificing meals. Foods like pasta and frozen vegetables help, but foods like beans and lentils start to replace more expensive items. And at the top, rice stands out because it doesn't just fill space on a plate, it supports everything else around it. That's why it ends up number one so often, even when no one really talks about it. If you had to cut your grocery budget in half tomorrow, which one of these foods would you lean on first, and which one would disappear from your cart completely? Drop that in the comments. And if this video made you look at everyday food a little differently, make sure you're subscribed. And before you go, check out one of the videos showing at your screen right now.